This video will provide you tips for writing research papers. Length requirements. There are some easy ways to lose points when writing papers. One of those is to write a paper shorter than the minimum length required by the professor. If the professor tells you to write a 10 to 12 page paper, writing 9 complete pages of text means you only did 90% of the work. The professor would be completely justified to take 10% off your grade before even reading one word. Note that the cover page, the table of contents, if that's required, and the bibliography don't usually count in page requirements. Also, if the page requirement is 10 to 12 pages, realize that writing 10 pages and meeting the minimum does not guarantee you an A. You need to make sure that you cover the topic thoroughly that you've been assigned. Sometimes the minimum requirement won't guarantee you've covered the topic thoroughly. Follow instructions. Make sure you follow the instructions the professor provides. One aspect of an education that students many times don't grasp is the importance of following directions. This is part of your education. So when the professor provides detailed instructions for your assignment, make sure you read them before your assignment and then read them again after you finish your assignment. Number 3, turn in the assignment on time. Make sure you start your paper early enough to finish it on time. Some professors will subtract a significant portion of your grade for turning in late assignments. Other professors may not accept the late assignments whatsoever. Number 4, do not use the first person. In most academic writing, use of the first person is not acceptable. Many professors believe that using the first person makes a person sound too subjective. I have found that when students regularly employ the first person, their emotions and opinions infiltrate the paper more than students who avoid the first person. Unless your professor indicates otherwise, you should assume that you are to avoid entirely the first person in academic writing. This might sound simple, but realize that words like I, we, us, and our are all in the first person. Let's look at how to edit a sentence that contains a first person pronoun. Here is the sentence. I am writing this paper to demonstrate the deity of Christ. The sentence contains a first person pronoun, so we need to remove it. An improved version would look like this. This paper is being written to demonstrate the deity of Christ. This is an improvement because the first person is removed, but the verb is being written is a little awkward and is a passive verb. So, a still better sentence would be, the evidence presented in this paper will demonstrate the deity of Christ. There is no first person and the sentence reads more smoothly. Number 5, don't use contractions unless necessary. Of course, I just broke that rule. This is a rule that you should generally keep. However, there are times that not using a contraction makes the sentence sound simply horrible. If the style is severely hindered by removing the contraction, you may use it, but do so sparingly. Number 6, avoid using abbreviations. Oftentimes, students will use abbreviations like etc. after a list of items like, I like all the colors equally, red, blue, purple, green, etc. In academic writing, the only abbreviations typically allowed are, number 1, i.e., which means in other words. It comes from a Latin phrase that means roughly that is. Number 2, e.g., which means for example, which also comes from a Latin phrase that means for example. And number 3, abbreviations of Bible book names. For example, if you have Genesis, you can abbreviate it to Gen. If you have Matthew, you can abbreviate it to Matt. However, if they are beginning a sentence, you should write out the entire word. Number 7, capitalization rules. For some reason, many students will somewhat randomly capitalize words that should be lowercase, and will retain the lowercase for words that should be capitalized. While the following rules are not universally practiced, I have found that following these rules brings greater clarity to your thoughts and makes the most sense grammatically. The word Bible has a capital B. The word biblical has a lowercase b. The word scripture has a capital S. The word scriptural has a lowercase s. In the title, The Gospel of John, the word gospel is capitalized. In the phrase, I preach the gospel, the word gospel is not capitalized. This last rule is a particularly helpful distinction. Number 8. Write out small numbers like 2 and 10. However, don't write out large numbers like 1,324,862. Instead, write it out like this: 1, 324, 862. However, when referencing a verse like John 3:16, don't write out the numbers. Number 9. Don't use slang. Avoid phrases like, the Gospel of John is the bomb. Don't use words like dude or phrases like off the hook. Number 10. Avoid using semicolons. In general, you should do this. Most students don't quite know the appropriate use of the semicolon. You would do well to avoid them altogether. Number 11. Toward is a preposition, so avoid towards. Apparently, towards is acceptable in British grammar, so you might discover it in some books you read. Regardless, avoid the word towards in your academic writing. Number 12. Make sure to not split your infinitives. Now, what do I mean by that? In that sentence, to split is an infinitive. I broke the rule, meaning I split the infinitive, by putting the word not between the word to and split. Let's correct that sentence. Make sure not to split your infinitives. There is some debate among grammarians about this rule. However, for your academic writing, just avoid splitting infinitives. And definitely do not split the infinitive with 2 or more words. Number 13. Here is the final tip. Edit, edit, edit. Do not turn in sloppy work. Reread your papers or have someone else read it for you. Maybe you can trade papers with someone in class. You can read their paper and they can read yours. Also, if you read your paper out loud, sometimes you can hear something that sounds awkward that you don't see with your eyes. A final trick is to start reading at the end of your paper and read it sentence by sentence backwards. This forces you to examine every sentence individually. However, this method will not help in examining the structure or flow of the paper. Conclusion. These are 13 tips for writing research papers. Some students think that a good writer can sit down at their computer and just type out a paper. Actually, almost no good writers exist, just good editors. Everyone writes differently. I have a friend who carefully crafts every single sentence in his paragraph, and then he goes back through the paragraph and edits it over and over until he's satisfied. I could never write that way. Instead, I throw all my thoughts into Microsoft Word and go over and edit them after putting all my thoughts into the computer. My first draft is pretty horrendous, while my friend's first draft is great. However, his first draft takes him 3 to 4 times as long as mine. Neither method is right or wrong. You need to figure out which method works best for you. But in the end, make sure you have adequate time to edit your papers, for that is the key to good writing.